Hello everybody, my name is James Luggett, and today let's talk about Highlander 3, which is such a baffling film, but in order to understand why, we need to look at its production history. After the complete disaster that was Highlander 2, you'd be forgiven for assuming the franchise would be dead, but the following year the TV series started and saved the franchise. In the TV series, they ignored the end of the first film where Connor won the prize and became mortal and all the other mortals were killed. Now, Christopher Lambert, who only played Connor, only appeared in the TV pilot to pass the torch to his cousin Duncan MacLeod. Presumably fueled by the success of the TV series, the producers decided to make a Highlander 3 following Connor. Now, you would think that it would take place in the continuity of the TV series to follow what Connor was up to after the pilot, since Lambert was too expensive to even reuse footage of in the TV series, let alone bring back. Instead, they made a standalone sequel to completely ignore the TV series. What? Producer Bill Panzer claimed in an interview that they inserted some stealth references into the movie to link it back to the TV series, but what those references are, I really couldn't say. And even if he was telling the truth, the movie is completely incompatible with the TV series. Even ignoring the fact that Connor wins the prize again and there's no more Immortals, the lore of the first film is used and not the changes made to the TV series, like the Immortals no longer reviving instantly after receiving mortal wounds and heavily simplifying the quickening. And it also doesn't help that this is just basically a remake of the first film, but as a sequel. Why oh why did Panzer and Davis decide to make so many terrible decisions with this franchise? It's undoubtedly the least terrible sequel. It's nowhere near as stupid as Highlander 2, it's nowhere near as insulting as Endgame, and it's not as determined to destroy the franchise as The Source, but it's also a very dumb and pointless movie. They really should have just made a prequel instead. The TV series showed how much potential you could do. It's one of the reasons why I'm looking forward to the remake. Yes, it's not going to be as good as the original film, but imagine some of the ideas and concept of the TV series being done in the movie, budget and time, but assuming it's well done, of course. But enough delay. Here is why Highlander 3 is so baffling. Starting off with the bafflement, Connor's delivering his opening narration to the camera. Why? Who is he talking to? But otherwise, I do like the opening 16 minutes of the movie. Nakano is a very different mentor than Ramirez, and having actual magic involved is pretty cool. Magic is something that's also in the TV series, but having a movie allows it to be done with the budget and time that the TV series lacked to mixed results. Sometimes it looks really good, but other times it looks really outdated. It also doesn't help that Kane often forgets he has magic and barely uses it. Oh yeah, Kane, he's the main villain of this movie, and in terms of Highlander's sequel villains, he's the best. He doesn't suffer the stupidity of Katana, the insufferableness of Kel, or basically everything at the Guardian. It also helps that Mario and Peebles is very entertaining, and is clearly having a lot of fun with the character. Anyway, I do find the quadruple takes annoying, but then again, at least this movie has a clear, distinctive style. That's something I don't think you could say about Endgame or The Source. Oh, and why do we flashback to the Kurgan stabbing Connor in the first movie when Kane does it? Why remain in the audience of this bad movie opening 15 minutes? Oh, and if you've watched the TV series and you're confused as to why Kane has two henchmen, if they were mortals, then they're all allowed to fight 2 against 1, well, that was only a rule established in the TV series and not the original movie, so it doesn't matter in this case. Anyway, the cave collapses around Kane and his henchmen, and we go to the present day, which is 1994. We also get the introduction to this movie's love interest, archaeologist Dr. Alexandria Johnson. If you wonder where Brenda is, it's later revealed she was killed in a car crash, and Connor didn't receive any injuries. This is because Kane and his henchmen were stuck in the cave, so they couldn't attend the gathering. Put aside the obvious question as to why that gathering happened or if the remaining mortals couldn't attend, wouldn't Connor have realized he did win the prize in the first film? I never liked this TV series establishing the first film happened but Connor didn't win the prize, something that the other entries in the franchise never understood. Is that there's something beautiful but poetic about Connor getting his mortality back from the man who took it away from him in the first place. And of all the Highlander sequels not to feature Brenda, imagine how much more interesting this film would have been with her in it. Imagine seeing how her relationship would have changed since the first movie. But no, we need a new love interest every time. Ugh. Anyway, Alex is the head of an archaeology team that's excavating the Carno's cave. That night, Kane and his henchmen break out of the cave, which is covered by wood. Wouldn't have made more sense for them to be frozen in the cave and there is to be unfrozen thanks to the archaeology team. Anyway, Kate kills one of his henchmen and the other goes off to find Connor. It's here we also get to see Connor and his annoying adopted son John. At least he doesn't have much screen time. Connor leaves John in the care of his friend Jack. And yes, Doctor Who fans, that is the Ralliard. Naturally, such a good actor only has 5 minutes of screen time. What the hell? Anyway, Connor goes back to New York, and after a lazy continuity error with the snow, he gets mugged and somehow knocked unconscious from the gunshots. In the first movie, we saw Kurgan take a full Uzi clip to the chest and get up instantly, but somehow a few revolver shots are enough to knock out Connor. What the hell? Did they accidentally use the lore from the TV series for this one bit? Was this one of the stealth references Panzer was talking about? Anyway, Connor gets taken to the hospital, and after freaking out for some reason, he gets restrained and put in the ward for mentally unwell patients. He escapes, and somehow, Kane's henchman not only managed to get from Japan to New York with his sword with no explanation, he somehow knows exactly where Connor is. What the fuck? Anyway, Connor easily kills the henchman and Kane senses it after having just arrived. In the international cut, he arrives via boat, but in the American cut, he arrives via teleportation. Which doesn't really make any sense, but I guess that's what happens when the studio head decides to spend $250,000 to act in more effects with the American release. Meanwhile, we get introduced to a cop investigating the beheading, just like the first film. It also doesn't help that he's very poorly acted in my opinion.
I remember things, you forget.
What's baffling is that this character is fully familiar with the investigation from the first film, despite the fact he's a new character. Why create a new character? What's infuriating is that in an earlier draft, not only was Bedso from the first film brought back, but also Rachel, who is never mentioned in this film. If it was an actor availability issue, then why not just make this character Garfield the homophobic cop from the first film? They look similar enough. So the cop confronts Connor outside his home, and wait, why is Connor only returning now? Where has he been for the past day? And it's never explained how he managed to retrieve his sword after presumably losing it in the mugging. And this recreation of Connor's law from the first film looks alright. The inside is pretty accurate, even though they didn't get all the colours completely right, but the outside looks pretty different. Did they not have enough reference photos or something? After a really thrilling scene of Kane using his magic to steal sunglasses, Connor sees the cop outside his apartment, just like Bedso was outside Brenda's place in the first film, before he sees Alex on TV and remembers back to 1788 France, where he had a romance with Sarah Barrington, a woman written from England who looks exactly like Alex. A doomed romance told through multiple flashbacks throughout the film, just like Connor and Heather in the first film. Meanwhile, Kane also sees Alex on TV, and Kane says he knows what she doesn't know. The villain paying attention to a report where he knows something that the woman talking does not, just like the Kurgan listening to the radio in the first movie. Anyway, Kane then risks a sex worker and is rough with her, just like Kurgan and Canny in the first movie. Are you tired of me saying that yet? How do you think I feel watching this movie? Anyway, Alex returns to New York. I haven't really talked about her scenes yet, because that's it's just mostly repeating Brenda scenes from the first film, with a piece of cloth instead of sword fragments this time around, but a lot less interesting. I think that this is also due to Deborah Kara Unger's performance not being as good as Roxanne Hart from the first film, and we've seen this all before, so it isn't as compelling to watch. So Alex follows Connor to a Japanese spiritual center after Kane visits her, and we get another flashback to Connor and Sarah where they spend romantic time together before being forced apart thanks to the French Revolution. Alex talks to Connor before they're interrupted by Kane. The love interest and Connor interacting, then Connor having to fight the main villain after being followed by the love interest, having not encountered each other since their first confrontation centuries earlier. Say with me now, just like the first film. However, I can give this movie legitimate praise for this one scene because it's the only time in the franchise, at least me making this before the remake and whether it comes after it's released, we get an actual fight on the holy ground that remembers the rules. After a fun fight scene, Connor's sword is smashed and the building sustains heavy damage. Connor tells Alex to stay away from him and leaves, just like the first movie. As the cop is talking to Alex, we flash back again. Connor has been captured and his immortal friend Pierre decides to swap places with him, having grown tired of being immortal. Sarah witnesses the execution, thinks it's Connor who's been killed. We also don't get a quickening here. It was established in the TV series that if an immortal wasn't nearby to absorb a quickening, then it would be lost forever, so I guess Connor wasn't close enough to absorb Pierre quickening? Anyway, Alex then visits Connor at his loft, kind of like Brenda visiting Connor's shop in the first movie, and we get the final flashback to Sarah. Connor makes it back to her just to discover she's now married and has a family, so he decides to leave her be. I shouldn't be praising this movie by not having Connor stay with her until she dies of old age, but considering how much this is ripped off the first film already, I pretty much have to. Anyway, Connor doesn't give any straight answers and she leaves, and Connor goes back to Scotland to reforge his sword. He fails until Alex shows up and gives him a bar of finely refined steel she found in the Connor's cave. Connor uses it to reforge his sword and Mr. Being immortal, and they become lovers. Just like the first movie. Although there's no stabbing this time around, so I guess it's not a complete rip-off. Afterwards, they go to a pub, and Connor figures out that Kane has impersonated him to kidnap John. Despite reaching the airport in time, Connor gets arrested and placed on interrogation, while Kane takes John a chaotic car ride, just like Brenda and Kurgan in the first movie. This scene was also in Highlander 2 using the train, and was scripted for Endgame, but was never filmed. Anyway, the cops are forced to let Connor go due to lack of evidence, and Kane leaves a voicemail to Connor, telling him where to find John. Just like Kurgan in the first movie. I am looking forward to never having to say that phrase again. They meet in the church, and after some terrible dialogue...
And all the while it was you and your little immortal pecker that really didn't do the pecking.
They go to a factory where they have the final fight. It's a pretty good fight, even if the music sounds very similar to Motley Crue's Dr. Feelgood. But there's a few dumb parts of the fight, like Kane gets cut in half at one point and Connor just stands there while Kane very slowly reattaches himself. What the hell? Anyway, Connor wins and gains the prize, just like the first film. Oh, in the US cut, they lazily reuse a shot from the first film. Oops. Anyway, Connor goes back to Scotland, and the movie ends with a voiceover from Connor, just like the first movie. And that was Highlander 3. What a mess. It's usually the least terrible Highlander sequel, that's mostly because it just repeats what already works, just not as well. Oh well, thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye for now.